This theory is hardly new or groundbreaking, but I haven't seen any videos on it, and maybe people haven't really thought about it. So I will present my take and evidence for Laurian being Natalia. I read that young Natalia Lackless had run away with a troupe of traveling performers. Her parents had disowned her, of course, leaving Meluan the only heir to the Lackless lands. That explained Meluan's hatred of the Ruh, and made me doubly glad I hadn't made my Edema blood public here in Severin. Now with Laurian and how Kvothe described her history in the first book. My father was a better actor and musician than any of you have ever seen. My mother had a natural gift for words. They were both beautiful, with dark hair and easy laughter. They were rude down to their bones, and that really is all that needs to be said. Save perhaps that my mother was a noble before she was a trooper. She told me my father had lured her from a miserable, dreary hell with sweet music and sweeter words. I could only assume she meant Three Crossings, where we went to visit relatives when I was younger. Once. Then, of course, you have Lady Lackless, Meluan herself, especially the effect her appearance has on Kvothe, and how he describes her. I walked the Lady Lackless to the table and held out the chair. I avoided looking in her direction as we walked the length of the room, but as I helped her into her seat, her profile struck me with such strong resemblance, but I couldn't help but stare. I knew her. I was certain of it, but I couldn't, for the life of me, remember where we might have met. After Kvothe spends considerable time staring at Meluan, she responds with, "Do you see aught that interests you?" Which I find interesting because aught looks like ant when it's written, which it very well could be coincidence, but this is Kingkiller Chronicles, and Patrick Rothfuss is pretty well known for giving nods to things going on. I think it's also important to note that the word ought was only used twice in the entirety of Wise Man's Fear, and both times were in Severin. What I find important is the context surrounding the poem, which is basically that Kvothe did not realize that his mother was there, and recited the poem absent-mindedly. He didn't want to admit that he heard it from a town child, so when she asked, "What were you just saying, sweet?" that he wouldn't really respond. It took her a while to figure out what words to use, and to word exactly how to phrase her disappointment. He was ultimately chastised for spreading gossip, because Lady Lackless was not there to defend herself. The second is a song written by Arladin about his dear wife who felt the poem was so offensive that he should sleep under the wagon. Dark Laurian, Arladin's wife, has a face like a blade of a knife, has a voice like a prickle-down burr, but can tally a sum like a moneylender. My sweet Tally cannot cook, but she keeps a tidy ledger book. For all her faults I do confess, it's worth my life to make my wife not tally a lot less. With the last line sounding very similar to Natalia Lackless, the lost sister to Meluan, who left her family for an Edema trooper. With Laurian taking offense to both poems, I would think they'd be pretty outrageous. But they really aren't. They're slightly cheeky rhymes, and she claimed the meter is what anged her about the Not Tally a Lot Less poem, not the fact that it was a little bit disparaging. But, on that note, it also seems unlikely that one would write a poem like that to a significant other unless it's a type of humor they share. It could very well be that she actually likes it when he says things like that about her, because it helps show that he's not putting her on a pedestal because of her high birth. and that might be something that they actually use in an affectionate manner for that reason. At this point, this is what I have in my thought process. There are some things that appear to contradict it, but I do ultimately believe that Meluan is Kvothe's aunt. Too many things add up in too much of a significant way. If Laurian really is Natalia, then that means that she would have to be Meluan's sister, and that would make Meluan Kvothe's aunt. And Kvothe helped Meluan become the wife of Alvaron so that he could have an heir. So yes, Kvothe, in my opinion, did seduce his aunt. Now, I wanted to include a little bonus fact because I'm sure a lot of people aren't very familiar with this series, but there is one line that I think almost everybody watching this would be familiar with. Let's see if you can recognize it from the quotes within the book. Kvothe threw a final log onto the fire and stood, but as he stepped from the hearth, one of his legs twisted underneath him and he fell heavily to the floor, knocking over a chair. Several of the travelers hurried over, but the innkeeper was already on his feet, waving to people back to their seats. No, I'm fine. Sorry to startle anyone." In spite of his grin, it was obvious he'd hurt himself. His face was tight with pain, and he leaned heavily on a chair for support. "Took an arrow in the knee on my way through the Eld 3 summers ago. It gives out every now and then," he grimaced and said wistfully. "It's what made me give up the good life on the road." He reached down and touched his oddly bent leg tenderly. That is right. The line, "took an arrow in the knee," was added to Skyrim as a reference to Name of the Wind. And I'm sure all of you are familiar with that meme.